Hello, everybody. Today's review is going to be of Bodies, 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 which, again, another 8 out of 10. So, three movies with an 8 out of 10 rating, but I mean, they were all phenomenal in like their own. Well, they were all good, very good movies in their own way. I guess phenomenal would be like a 10 out of 10 rating, right? Like nothing I can see wrong with the movie, but uh, yeah, I wouldn't say this was like a perfect movie in any way. I am very happy though that they didn't add like any paranormal stuff in this movie because I was really worried about that at certain points that they were going to add something like that into this movie, but I'm glad they didn't go that direction because that would have just taken away from the movie completely because I was a little skeptical about what this movie was going to be, but yeah, no paranormal stuff in it, which is good because paranormal movies aren't really, although I believe in the paranormal, most paranormal movies I find are kind of stale, especially when they have like so many sequels, right? Like if we're talking like The Conjuring or what's the other big one? Paranormal Activity. Like the first couple were good, and then it just kind of got too weird after that. Now I know they've done a couple like side projects with the Paranormal Activity movies that look somewhat interesting, and I might actually watch them at some point in time. But yeah, other than that, the series just kind of got boring. Like after the third and fourth movie, it's just the telling of the story. I was like, how many times can they repeat the same thing, right? And yeah, same with the Conjuring movies. Like the first one's great, and then after that, it just kind of gets boring. Yeah, at least to me, anyway. But yeah, I gave this one an 8 out of 10, just like the last two reviews, and we'll go over the cast list. So Amandla Stenberg played Sophie. Maria Bakova played B. Mia Law, I want to say is how you pronounce her name, played Jordan. Rachel Sennett played Alice. Chase Sue Wonders played Emma. Pete Davidson, who played David. So, yeah, I guess they didn't really change much for him. Lee Pace, who played Greg, and then Connor O'Malley, who played Max. Now, I'm not really sure. I don't even really remember this Max guy being in the movie, other than maybe them mentioning his name a couple of times about him leaving really like early into the party that they were having. So the movie starts out with a really weird, like, intense kissing scene. That just I wasn't expecting. I was kind of like, oh, well, what an opening to a movie, right? So it seems that these two girls like are pretty deeply in love. And Sophie, who seems to be like our main character, is bringing her new girlfriend B to meet all of her friends. Now, I guess they had some sort of group chat going, and Sophie never really responded to it, I guess. So when she shows up, there seems to be like quite a bit of tension between the group. And I guess Sophie had just like recently gotten out of rehab. Um, so it seems like all of her friends are like a bunch of party animals, right? And they're having like this long weekend, like bender type thing. And so it seems like a lot of them don't really want to see her. And I don't really know why. I guess maybe because she was like, from the sounds of it, at the end, like near the end of the movie, she was like one of the richest between all of her friends. And I guess maybe they seemed a little bit jealous of her in a sense, but I guess most of her friends were all kind of from the same, like cut from the same cloth. They were all kind of rich, whether they were like upper class or like upper middle class, I guess you could say. Yeah, but they all weren't like hurting for money. Let's just say that much. Definitely with just the house they were in, having this party at or whatever. So yeah, again, things seem tense, and then um, yeah, a lot of them just seem kind of weirded out with the whole situation of her being there and kind of feel like they shouldn't really be doing what they're doing with her around. But they start getting like B involved in the partying too, and she seems to kind of like take to Sophie's friends pretty well, and um, I guess some of her friends uh, have been with her before with Sophie, so yeah, it's definitely like a weird situation, and a couple of the guys, like one of the characters, Greg, is just like one of the girls' new what was it? Alice's new boyfriend, who they thought was like a war vet, I guess, but she calls him like GI Joe, I guess, because he's like strong, like pretty well built, like pretty good physique sort of thing. So, of course, they thought he was a war vet, but they find out later in the movie that he was just a veterinarian. So, totally just like a whole bunch of twists and turns in this movie that you're never really expecting. So Sophie suggests playing this game called Bodies, 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 where I guess there's like, I don't really know how it worked entirely. Like, she explains a little bit, but so I guess mainly there's like, it's like a murder mystery game. So there's, I don't know what the whole sense of like the slapping each other was and like taking the shots. I'm not sure whether it was like the first person to kind of give up was the killer. Maybe that was it. Or maybe I should have just listened better to the rules. Anyway, there's one person who's the killer, right? And you kind of have to guess who it is. They shut off the lights, and the killer picks one person and touches them on the back, and then that person has to pretend they're dead. And then the group yells out, bodies, 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 and the lights come back on. So it's kind of almost like Clue in a sense, right? Where you're trying to find out who the killer is and kind of like see what their tells are and sort of thing. So it seems that most people are going after Emma and David as the two potential killers. And of course, everybody's just kind of pointing fingers, right? And then David kind of goes on like this little temper tantrum, I guess you could call it, and storms out of the room. And then he isn't seen for a long period of time. And then, of course, Greg isn't seen for a long period of time, so they think maybe Greg is the one that has killed David, and things just kind of escalate from there. And then it seems that Greg's kind of like, he couldn't sleep, so he decided to go into like the gym of the house, I guess, and like do his exercises and do like some, look like maybe blue light therapy as well. Like, just, he seems like a pretty like, obviously because he's a veterinarian, he seems like a bit of a survivalist too, so I can understand why they were a little bit maybe more frightened of him than anybody else, because he seemed like the strongest of the group, and he was obviously a little bit older than the rest of them too, right? So the power in David's house goes off after the storm gets worse. Like, they're expecting this big storm, and of course, I guess that's maybe another reason they were upset with Sophie, is because they kind of felt trapped with her due to the storm that was coming in, because I guess it was like sort of like a hurricane type storm. So yeah, not something you want to be like trying to get ahead of or trying to get out in, right? In order to get away from somebody. So I think a lot of the group felt a little trapped, unfortunately, because they didn't really actually invite her, or they kind of did, but they were doing it because they felt like they had to, I guess, in a sense. And then she brings this new girlfriend, of course, with her. And of course, another one brings a new boyfriend with them. So already things are kind of like tense, right? So yeah, the game. So eventually, one of them ends up finding David with like a cut on his neck, and he's like kind of like bumping up against the window, and then of course he dies. So now they've gone after Greg, and then it was B that ends up killing Greg, and then I think, was it Emma was the next one to go, I do believe, and then I think it was just down to 4 of them at that point. So I think it was, yeah, it was, oh God, yeah, it was David, and then Greg, and then Emma, right? And then Alice gets shot when they're all trying to fight for this gun, because of course at this point nobody's trusting anybody, right? Like, they throw it all at B, because B is like now the odd one out, because she was kind of invited and I guess had lied to Sophie about a whole bunch of stuff. So it's just like a whole big mess. But yeah, it was kind of cool that like it was supposed to start out as like a murder mystery, and then ended up that it just ended up being like all of them just slowly being like picked off one by one, or at least that's what you're thinking, right? Is that one person's the killer, and you're kind of like trying to pay attention to maybe like who's showing up last. And then at one point they all point the blame to Jordan at one point. And of course, Jordan pulls out this gun out of the bag and shoots Alice after they have like this argument. She shoots her in the leg, and then they're having this big scuffle for the gun, and Alice gets shot in the neck, I think, or head, something like that anyway, and like kills her instantly. And then I think at the end of the night, it was, yeah, Sophie admits to like giving Emma these pills, and then Emma got like way too out of hand and then ended up falling down the stairs. So a lot of these kills were like by accident, but it was all like premeditated by one person, right? So just absolutely insane that, this group of friends, basically due to the fact that the power went out and they had no Wi-Fi, ended up thinking that something had gone completely wrong based on just one person dying in the group, and then things just escalated to the point where all of them started to die. Like, it was just such a like escalated quickly situation, right? Uh, so yeah, the group, yeah, they did end up finding like a murder weapon. I thought it was a machete, but I guess it was the sword that his dad owned. That Greg had opened the champagne bottle with near the beginning of the movie. So yeah, the group, yeah, the confronts Axel about her new boyfriend, blah 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 blah. Yeah, about him. Uh, yeah, so then it was all B who ended up killing Greg with like the kettlebell. So yeah, some pretty brutal kills in this movie for what it was. And then of course, like I said, they ended up pointing the blame at B near the end of it. They kick her out of the house, and then she ends up coming back into the house through like the long ass like doggy door type setup thing. Um, yeah, it was just so weird, like that whole like, and there was no dog that I remember in the entire movie. So I'm like, why is that even set up? Maybe it was his parents' dog, and because they were away, but it was like this weird like long tube type thing almost to let the dog in and out of the house. It was just a very weird setup. Normally a doggy door would just be like on your front door, right? But this was like built into the house. So that's how B ends up getting back in, and then of course the whole gun situation. And then there's this huge fight between B and Jordan trying to get the gun, and she's trying to like tell her that she slept with Sophie, and just, they're obviously not really the greatest group of friends anyway. So there's this whole like tension between all of them, and they're just trying to cause problems all the time, it seems. And I guess that's what happens when they start playing the game, is that things get a little way too out of hand. But this time it got even worse, right? So yeah, B then asks Sophie to like see her text messages, and then they have like this little scuffle themselves. And then she ends up finding this other phone in like the mud outside, and it ends up being David's phone. So she uses his face to unlock the phone, because Face ID is a thing that you can use now. I potentially I wouldn't use it, but it feels like an easy way for people to get into your phone, right? So I never have set it up. I always use a passcode because I don't just want anybody getting into my phone, like only the people I trust. So anyway, at least that's how I would feel, right, about that kind of thing, because even, yeah, if you had been killed in like a sort of situation like that, anybody could access your phone and access anything that's on it. And I mean, we need to have some sort of privacy, a little bit anyway. Uh, so yeah, they find this video on the phone of David using the sword to try to open the champagne bottle, like another champagne bottle, I guess, himself. And he's trying to record it to like look all cool and probably come back to his friends and show them. And he's like swinging the blade towards himself, which is never a good idea. Don't do that. And then he ends up like hitting himself in the neck. So he had actually accidentally killed himself in the process of trying to like look cool. And then that whole night takes place where everything else happens, and you're like, oh my god, that all escalated based on the fact that they thought somebody else had killed David after they had played this game, because they were all so like paranoid of everybody right after David had died, that they just kind of started blaming each other, and blaming the people that were like outside of the normal group, right? And then they just kind of got into their own heads, and then stuff started happening. So it was just a very wild movie. And then at the very end, I believe, yeah, like Max, this other character that was supposed to be, I guess it was originally supposed to be at the party but had left, because I think they did mention him a couple of times. They, but he was gone, like he had left for the night, sort of thing. And he comes back in the morning and sees like all of the aftermath and goes, Like, what happened? And B just kind of looks at him and goes, I have I have reception now. And it's like, oh my God, how are you even going to explain that to somebody that wasn't there with you in the house the whole night? Like, because him seeing just David dead is going to be like minimal compared to what else he's going to see when he like enters the house. And I thought, to be honest, when I first saw it, I was like, oh my God, is that like David's father coming back home? And he's going to be like, what the heck happened in a storm? Like, but yeah, it was. I guess it was one of the other group members who had left earlier. So yeah, kind of crazy. Definitely a crazy movie, and I would watch it again. Like, it was just kind of like a fun movie. Just a very different take on like a murder, like thriller type movie where you're like, who is the killer? And then it ends up just being really nobody. It just ends up being like all of them sort of thing, because they were pointing the blame at everybody else but themselves, right? And if they maybe just had have taken some time and, tried to find a little bit more evidence to the situation, they would have actually just discovered that David had accidentally killed himself, and they could have just went on with the night, right? Or at least, stop worrying about trying to get help. Or yeah, they like could have waited till morning and then, said, here's the video proof of him doing what he did, like his own stupidity, and then that would have been it. But yeah, again, there would have been much of a movie there, I guess, if they had done that, right? So yeah, but yeah, 8 out of 10 for this movie. The soundtrack was a little weird, like not really. I guess because they were supposed to be partying, right? So it was kind of like a party track type deal for the entire movie. But yeah, it wasn't really my type of music, I guess. But anyway, it's really probably the only downfall, was that I didn't really feel the soundtrack was that fitting. But other than that, yeah, it was a pretty solid movie, and that's why I gave it an 8 out of 10. So I will see you guys in the next review. Bye bye for now.